Hello guys, and welcome to my new video, and today is a big one. We're looking at my predictions for the best raid healers in patch 9.2, but before we're gonna get started, big disclaimer, take this list with a big pinch of salt because there are a number of different parameters that can alter the power of healers. So if you're familiar with World of Warcraft, you'll know that during the Heroic Week, Blizzard usually issues a big list of class changes based on how healers performed or any class performed during the Heroic Week, and this usually comes at the end of the Heroic Week right before Mythic Raid is released. And on top of that, we haven't really seen the last couple of bosses, so if you have been progressing Mythic Raiding, you know that 99% of your vibes are probably going to be allocated to the very end of the raid tier in terms of the last couple of bosses, and there could be certain mechanics that could favor different healers and change the meta. So this list is basically a historic best guess type of prediction video. And if this list wasn't enough, on top of that there's going to be different power spikes that are coming towards healers and any of the classes in the game in terms of double legendaries, and you have a bit of RNG associated with your tier sets. So if you're watching Race to World first, you have to be aware that all of the classes, all of the players are going to be progressing most of the Race to World first with a single legendary. It's also possible that healers are gonna have a harder time getting tier set, because if there is an opportunity for trading tier sets, healers are not going to be prioritized in those terms. So even though a lot of this tier list is going to be based on Race to World first, I'm also going to be looking at a bit more casual content in terms of what healers are looking strong, because let's be honest, most of us will progress the raid with double legendaries, with tier sets if we get lucky. So that is something to consider before looking at the tier list. And these videos usually take me a while to edit because I'm just bad at editing. So if you do enjoy this type of content, please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And let's get started with the tier list. So this is a generic tier list that I'm going to be using, and I'm going to be starting off with the best healer that I feel will yield the best results for its user, and that is going to be the Discipline Priest. Now, I feel this Discipline Priest has a lot of disclaimers to it, and I'm going to be covering them, but first let's look at what's changing for Discipline Priest in 9.2, and that is absolutely nothing outside of the fact that you're getting a new tier set, you're getting double legendaries week 5 or starting on week 5, but let's look at what the tier set is going to bring. The tier set itself, the 2 set has been buffed recently, but you really want the 4 set. First of all, let's look at what players are going to be playing in the starting weeks, and that is going to be Kyrian. Without a doubt, Discipline Priest is going to be pumping as a Kyrian or Boon of Descended Priest. Kyrian combined with Clarity of Mind is going to be a very strong option in the starting weeks of the new raid, and I feel there is going to be a lot of options for a single or a double Discipline Priest being brought in Race to World first. And I know stacking classes is something that it was prevalent for a long time, but I do feel that Discipline Priest is the only healer that has the potential of stacking in the next raid, and I'll talk about that later down in the video. Discipline Priest is one of those healers that brings the 3 pillars that make a healer great at raiding, and that is good healing, passive damage, and damage reduction cooldown. And if you can utilize your Discipline Priest, you're always going to have a raid spot. But there are some negatives. Discipline Priest can be relatively squishy. It's not uncommon in Race to World first type of content for a Discipline Priest to use their pain suppression on themselves in order to survive certain mechanics. That has happened in the previous tiers. It is also correct to assume that Discipline Priest is relatively immobile, not healing on the move, but in terms of being relatively slow. You only have Feather, and a lot of priests in Race to World first content or any raid content will opt to go Goblin for that rocket jump. So this, in my eyes, is a clear winner when played correctly. Keep in mind that you have one of the strongest raid cooldowns in the game. That is going to be Barrier, 25% damage reduction. It does require people to stack, but believe it, even on fights where stacking is not really recommended, top end guilds will find ways to optimize Barrier. 25% damage reduction is absolutely nuts, especially when you're approaching content relatively under geared. So at the start, Discipline Priest will be pumping DPS and healing with Kyrian, Boon of Descendant with Clarity of Mind legendary, and once you have your 4 set bonus, once you have your double legendaries, you most likely will shift into Ventier, and Ventier will provide consistent healing on top of the fact that the 4 set bonus is going to synergize with Penitent legendary, and you will have a really nice, in my opinion, a really comfortable ramp and fitting in your empowered penances in that ramp rotation. So if you're a Discipline Priest right now preparing for 9.2, I would definitely level Kyrian and Ventier, because you most likely will swap to Ventier later down the line. But before we're gonna go to the next healer, we have to listen to a cautionary tale that will hopefully prevent a lot of people from misusing their raid roster. So this is Tony. Tony is a Restoration Druid. Tony has been playing Resto Druid for a long time, and Tony enjoys playing this Resto Druid. He plays it really well. Now, Tony's raid leader has been watching a lot of Race to World first, and he noticed that a lot of the top end guilds are bringing 1 Discipline Priest, maybe 2 Discipline Priests in a lot of raid fights, and the raid leader has asked Tony if he would swap to Discipline Priest. Now, Tony, being a team player, has said yes. It took Tony more than half of the raid tier to get used to playing Discipline. He died so many times because every time he pressed boon, he forgot that the boss actually has mechanics. And Tony did not have a good time. He did not have consistent ramps. He died a lot because he didn't account for the fact that Discipline Priests are relatively squishy. He didn't account for the fact that Discipline can be slow. You need to utilize your Feather, you need to utilize your Goblin or Rocket Jump. And Tony swapped away and is now playing Demon Hunter. So what is the moral of the story? By swapping away from a comfortable healer to a healer like Discipline Priest that requires a lot of practice, you might actually hinder your raid group's performance. And especially this is true for 9.2 because Blizzard has realized that there is a lot of healers who don't provide damage reduction, who don't provide passive damage, and they buffed the HPS. So there is a really valid reason to replace an underperforming Discipline Priest for, let's say, Restoration Druid, Holy Priest, because they will bring a lot more HPS if played correctly. So now let's move on to the next healer, and that's going to be in A tier. And honestly, A tier is going to be filled up with healers, and you can swap the positions of the classes here based on whether you need raid buffs, whether you have players that are more comfortable with those healers. And we're going to start off with Holy Paladin, and this is going to be a somewhat controversial pick right now because I have been talking with some of the Race to World First guilds, and a lot of them have mixed opinions about Holy Paladin at this given point. I know that a lot of guilds will probably run 1 or 2 Discipline Priests. After everything that has changed in 9.2, and this is the list of all the changes, there has been a roller coaster of emotions that Holy Paladins have to go through. And first, initially, there was a Venthyr Ashen Hallow nerf that everybody in the World of Warcraft community expected. There has been nerfs to healing, nerfs to damage, and also some baseline Holy Paladin DPS nerfs as well on top of that. But Blizzard went a little bit overboard and they also nerfed wings. So instead of providing 30% crit, damage and healing, it now only provides 20%. And this is pretty significant because the tier set bonus was looking to utilize that. So the community was an outroar and Blizzard did buff overall of Holy Paladins by 6%, and then they nerfed or halved the 4 set bonus. So now if you do have the 4 set bonus, each target hit by Light of Dawn has a 50% chance, not a 100% chance, to reduce the remaining cooldown of your wings by 2 seconds. So what do all of these changes mean in terms of covenants, in terms of double legendaries? I do feel that Venthyr Holy Paladin is still going to be a very popular option, especially when coming to Race to World First, especially when you're running single legendary with no tier set. You're going to be running something like Marad's Dying Breath, and you're going to have the same kind of playstyle that you had in 9.15. You're going to provide a lot of spot healing with Light of Dawn, followed by Light of the Martyr, and this build is going to be something that will be popular because Ashen Hallow damage patterns is just an ability that is insanely nice to coordinate in organized groups where you have your cooldowns laid out, where you know you need specific amount of healing, you need specific amount of damage. Ashen can fill in that role and it's going to last for a really long time. And then after you start getting your double legendaries, after you start getting your 4 set bonus and things like that, I think Holy Paladins are going to be looking into Necrolord. So if you're a Holy Paladin, definitely grind out Venthyr, definitely grind out Necrolord, because I think those are going to be very popular options depending on which week in patch 9.2 you are. Paladin still has a lot of utility because you are providing healing, you are providing passive DPS because you have to use damaging abilities. You are a melee healer, you're using damaging abilities to increase your healing, and you're still providing damage reduction through Aura Mastery, Devo, Aura combination. Now I'm a little bit worried about the pure HPS portion of Holy Paladin, especially when coming into 9.2, but I do feel if Holy Paladin is going to be trailing behind by a significant margin, this is going to be fixed in the initial Heroic Week patch tuning. Keep in mind that the Devo Aura Master combination can sometimes be overhyped because as a Paladin in raid group, you're providing 3% damage reduction and Aura Master brings that up to 15. So technically, you have a 3-minute cooldown that is going to provide 12% damage reduction, which isn't amazing on paper, but when you take into account that it does not have range or stacking limitations, unlike Spirit Link or Barrier, Devo Aura Master combination can be relatively easy to use and utilize in raid situations. On a personal note, I actually really enjoy Holy Paladin tier set, and I feel that when you have the tier set and double legendary combo and trying out Necrolord for the first time, using Light of Dawns in raid situations can feel really fulfilling, unlike trying to use Light of Dawn in Mythic Plus, where I feel it is a lot more difficult. My only gripe about the tier set, it does have some randomness associated with it, and I don't like that when it comes to healing classes. Now let's go to the next healer, and like I mentioned, A tier in terms of healers is super interchangeable based on your group composition, and I'm going to be putting Mistweaver Monk here, and I know people are going to be surprised, maybe shocked, or maybe they were expecting this because Mistweaver went through a lot of things in terms of 9.15 and transitioning in 9.2. So Mistweaver was the absolute HPS powerhouse in 9.15 because a lot of the guilds overlooked the changes to Ventier that happened before Mythic Sanctum Donation came out, and that is something that led to Mistweavers being absolutely undervalued in Sanctum Domination, and a lot of people were expecting or wanting Mistweaver to be brought in to raise the world first in 9.2. So what's happening in terms of 9.2 and the changes? Mistweavers got nerfed, and honestly, the nerf to Ventier is pretty sizable. It's going to cut down the uptime by 50%, and it is going to be significant enough for Mistweavers to start looking at other covenants. I fully expect that a lot of Mistweavers at the start of the raid tier are going to be sticking with Ventier. They're still going to be pumping out Fallen Order. They're still going to be using the Sinister Teaching Legendary. And once you're getting your tier set, once you're getting your double legendaries, I think Bonedust Brew Necrolord is going to be edging out in terms of popularity. Now keep in mind, Bonedust Brew and things like that have been fixed and have been buffed, but it does require you to pay attention to when you're using it. It does feel better on stacked fights. It's not like Fallen Order, click and forget type of thing. Bonedust Brew requires some actual thinking. Now, when we look at the 4-set and 2-set bonus, the 4-set bonus feels really nice if you can utilize it. In terms of the healing potential, it can be quite big, but this is going to require certain talents and certain uses. Now, once you use a Thunder Focus Tea and you combine that with something like Refreshing Jade Wind or Chi Burst, you're gonna have significant amount of HPS burst healing. You have to keep in mind there's some documented changes in terms of Miswraps. Miswraps no longer work with Fallen or the Monks, and this talent is probably no longer going to be used, especially when you have your 4-set bonus. When you have your 4-set bonus, Thunder Focus Tea into Refreshing Jade Wind into something like Chi Burst is going to be pretty significant HPS boost. But depending on who you ask, this playstyle is going to go more towards Mistweavers not needing health frames in order to do their healing. A lot of their healing abilities are going to be handled by the game. They don't require you to target specific members in the raid group. You're just basically pumping out heals, pressing buttons, and everything else is handled for you. And in terms of double legendaries and what legendaries are going to be popular, like I mentioned, Bonedust Brew and Necrolord is going to be a very popular combination when you have the tier set bonus and double legendaries, and I think combination with Ancient Teachings of the Monastery is going to be a really strong option for any raiding Mistweaver Monk. And I almost forgot, one of the main reasons to bring a Mistweaver, depending on which raid buffs you have in a party, is going to be Mystic Touch. 5% physical debuff is going to be a really strong asset to a raid team, especially if your raid team is going to be focused around melee, and I know Enhancement Shaman is probably going to be popular in Race to World First, and building a melee group around Enhancement Shaman on top of that, having a Monk for 5% physical debuff is going to be a really nice combination. I fully expect a lot of the Race to World First guilds to at least have a Mistweaver in the roster ready to go. I know there's going to be, like I said, I've been talking to some of the Race to World First guilds, and they've told me basically that they have a Monk that they will bring at least for a couple of fights, especially because getting that 5% physical debuff can only come from 3 sources, and that is going to be Mistweaver Monk, Windwalker Monk. Windwalker is not looking fantastic on single target fights, and I feel Windwalkers are probably going to be somewhat of a rarity when it comes to Race to World First. And then you have a Brewmaster Monk, which is actually a really strong tank right now, but I know there are certain fights in the new raid that are going to promote tank stacking, especially Blood Decay stacking. Anduin is looking like a possible fight where that could happen. And the only way to get or optimize your 5% physical debuff is going to be coming from a Mistweaver Monk. I definitely feel you should keep an eye out on Mistweaver Monk. Even with the nerfs, Mistweaver provides a really significant amount of HPS. They provide passive damage, and a lot of other healers cannot provide passive damage. Mistweaver is lacking a damage reduction cooldown, but if Ventier Monk was not nerfed, I fully expected multiple Mistweaver Monks to be stacked in Race to World First content, which sounds insane because the community perception has been so poor for such a long time. So now let's go to our next healer, and like I mentioned, I have to say this all the time, the A tier is interchangeable completely, and that is going to be Restoration Shaman. Now Resto Shaman in terms of changes in 9.2, very little impactful changes, nothing is really changing for Resto Shaman. If you enjoyed and liked Resto Shaman in 9.15, you're gonna like Resto Shaman in 9.2. And now let's go to the tier set bonuses, and tier set bonuses are going to promote the use of Chain Heal, and I know a lot of people might like that or not. I feel that Chain Heal has been an iconic part of Shaman Toolkit for a long time, and it's been abandoned to some extent in 9.15, and anything that's going to bring that back, I feel is going to be really nice. The problem is that a lot of the times when Blizzard tries to balance Chain Heal, it's either unusable or completely overpowered and you spam it all the time. So we'll have to see how this is going to turn out in 9.2. There is 2 parts for it. The first part is that when you use your certain totems, that is going to be Cloudburst Totem, Healing Tide Totem, Mana Tide Totem, or Spirit Link Totem, there's going to be a free Chain Heal shooting out of those. And that free Chain Heal is going to go towards your Cloudburst if it's active at that given point, so more free healing. Now the second portion of the 4-set bonus, Chain Heal critical strikes, any bounces of the Chain Heal, are going to reduce the cooldown of your totem by 2 seconds. Now, which totem is going to prioritize? How exactly does it work? It is still up to debate. It's still, or at least the last time I checked, it was working with Kyrian Vesper totem cooldown reduction as well. So there is hidden value to Kyrian coming from the 4 set. And now let's go to the most frequently asked question that I get on streams and on YouTube. What Covenant should replace Resto Shaman? And honestly, if you're a competitive Resto Shaman, I would get every Covenant ready to go because you can make any Covenant work in raid situations. I think initially or early on, a lot of Resto Shamans are going to stick with Necrolord, with Primal Tide Core Legendary. Keep in mind, Primal Tide Core Legendary is going to be a legendary that you're going to be using with any Covenant if you're looking for HPS. And you have access to double legendaries at that given point. But don't be deceived. Primal Tide Core Legendary is super average and it's not that amazing, and you have to justify the use of this legendary versus the use of a DPS legendary, especially in high-end mythic raid content. So I do feel that Necrolord is still going to be very popular at the start. I do think that a lot of people are going to go for Necro or Venti in terms of HPS gains. I still think you can make Nightwave work if you need that, you know, healing tide cooldown reduction, or if you can fit into a fight, but I also feel that a lot of high-end mythic raiding Resto Shamans are going to go for the Kyrian option to provide more DPS. So Resto Shaman could be a healer that provides good utility, good HPS, and decent DPS by using Vesper Totem and possibly combining it with a DPS legendary instead of Primal Tide Core. We'll have to see. So why bring a Restoration Shaman in raid? Because they provide good utility and good healing. At the end of the day, Resto Shaman HPS is very decent. They might not be the top HPS healers because a lot of the other healers received some significant HPS buffs, but Restoration Shaman provides really significant utility through things like Spirit Link Totem, through things like APT Totem. Again, APT Totem in progression rating is really strong. Windrush Totem provides you with a movement boost, which again can be very valuable, especially if the new raid is going to be somewhat similar to Sanctum of Domination. I do think the Spirit Link can be absolute MVP in certain raid situations. Anytime you hear a raid leader say, let's just heal through this, they're usually trying to do something in terms of skipping a mob, bypassing a certain mechanic that maybe should not have been bypassed, but it is made possible with the use of Spirit Link Totem, and Spirit Link Totem becomes MVP. But in a lot of other situations, Spirit Link can be somewhat overhyped in terms of what it can provide. So depending on which boss and what tactics you're using, Spirit Link can be absolutely life-saving, or it can be okay. Again, you do provide 10% damage reduction and kind of HP equalization, but it does depend on the fight. So let's move on to the next healer, and that is going to be, again, Restoration Druid in an A tier. As you can see, the balance is not looking too bad, but why is Resto Druid here? What are the advantages and disadvantages? What is changing in 9.2 for Resto Druid? As you can see here, big DPS buffs, big healing buffs. Overall, really warranted changes. Blizzard has finally saw that there are certain healers who don't provide passive damage, who don't have damage reduction, and they need to have a stronger niche, and that is going to be the HPS king. Resto Druid, in my opinion, is looking extremely strong in terms of pure HPS. When you get your 4 set bonus, and again, the tier set bonus for Resto Druid is looking really strong in terms of the HPS it can provide. It actually is looking to be really interesting because the 4 set bonus, every 3 Swiftmans, you're gonna get 3 of life. Combine that with Nightwave. Nightwave is looking to be like the way to go for Resto Druid in raid situations with the Convoke legendary. So think about this. You can actually utilize your 4 set bonus and you can track the amount of Swiftmans you're using, and your 3rd Swiftman, you can try and align it with Convoke. The fact that when you use your Swiftman, you're going to go in 3 of life and then you press Convoke means that you're going to have a really powerful Convoke, and you can combine that with Soul of the Forest talent, which might be more viable, more optimal in raid situations. You're going to get a really powerful healing during those bursts. I'm not saying this is going to be mandatory or everyone's going to be doing this, but it's something to consider when you're looking for those 1-minute burst healing opportunities. Once you have the availability of the 4 set bonus double legendaries, I do think that the Resto Druid is going to pop off in terms of HPS. Celestial Spirits plus Vision of Unending Growth plus tier set does have synergy, and I think Resto Druid is going to feel really strong in terms of the healing that it can provide. Unfortunately, Resto Druid does not have passive damage. It has to sacrifice healing if he wants to DPS, and Resto Druid does not have damage reduction, which might bring down the value of Resto Druid, but I still think it is a very competitive healer, and depending on what your healing roster is looking like, Resto Druid can really complement your healing roster if you're missing that hot healing. And now let's look at the last healer, and honestly, it's not the worst healer. I'm just putting it here because I just cannot decide the order of A tier, and I'm just really undecisive, but Holy Priest. Holy Priest is going to be one of those healers that people are going to be sleeping on in 9.2. I actually feel that if you look at the changes of Holy Priest, big DPS buffs, big healing buffs, Holy Priest is going to stand on its own. Again, a lot of guilds might not be looking at Symbol of Hope as a true utility spell, but I do think it can be utilized, but I don't think it's going to be as important as a lot of people make it out to be. I think Holy Priest is going to be the undeniable or one of the kings of spot healing. A lot of people when talking about spot healing, they're looking at Holy Paladin, Marat's Dying Breath Legendary, and then using Light of the Martyr, and they're always overlooking Flash Concentration Holy Priest. Flash Concentration Holy Priest is only gonna gain value in 9.2 because of the tier set. A lot of people overlook the fact that Holy Priest is going to have a lot of synergy when it comes to spot healing, especially in raid situation. Again, I talked about Flash Concentration. Flash Concentration is still looking to be like the main legendary for both raid and Mythic Plus situations for Holy Priest. But when you combine Flash Concentration with the tier set bonus, and believe me, the tier set bonus can be utilized in so many different ways, on top of the fact you have Resonant Words, Conduit, and now you're looking at, I don't know, like a 50+K crit of heal if you use it after Holy Word spell. And Holy Word spell cooldown reduction is also going to be reduced because of your tier set bonus, and you have 3 Holy Word spells: Holy Word, Serenity, Sanctify, and Chastise. And Chastise is going to be part of your rotation that is also going to deal damage. So you're actually dealing damage and increasing your healing. Now in terms of Covenants for Holy Priest, honestly, I don't think Holy Priest gains a whole lot of value from Covenants, and you can pretty much run any. But I do think Night Fae is going to edge out because it provides a lot of quality of life improvements for priests, because priests still have a lot of disadvantages. Holy Priest does suffer from the fact that they're relatively slow. You do have Feather, and there is a lot of boss mechanics that you might have to avoid, and Night Fae is going to provide you with a blink, and that blink is going to be pretty valuable in a lot of the mythic and raiding. On top of the fact that you have a lot of quality of life improvements in terms of additional mana, in terms of additional cooldown reduction that can improve your HPS. So I do think Holy Priest is going to have a relatively simple choice. Night Fae for a lot of high-end raiding content, on top of the fact that you're going to be using Flash Concentration, and then once you have your double legendaries, you're going to have your Night Fae Covenant specific legendary to complement this build. And I do think the community perception of Holy Priest is really bad in a lot of the content, and I think it's going to take a long time before the community perception is going to be a little bit better. I think 9.2 is going to open a lot of people's eyes in terms of what the potential of Holy Priest can be, especially in Mythic Plus content. And I do think that a lot of the times if you do play Priest, especially in high-end raiding, you're just going to be like, just play Discipline Priest. If you have a Priest who can play Discipline Priest really well, consistent ramps, does not die, you'll probably be always asked to play Discipline Priest. But if you cannot or don't want to play Discipline Priest, I think playing Holy Priest is going to be a really good alternative for a lot of guilds out there. So just a quick summary to this very long video. Again, I'm rambling on about healers, but I do feel very passionate about healer balance both in raids and Mythic Plus, and I do think that the raiding balance in terms of healers is going to be extremely close in this tier. I think Blizzard did exactly what the community wanted. They buffed the healers that don't provide passive damage, that don't provide damage reduction, and they buffed their HPS. So now you have Resto Druid and Holy Priest who had significant increases to their HPS. You had a Mistweaver Monk who does provide passive damage but doesn't have damage reduction, who got a nerf, but to some extent it was somewhat justified because I think Monk is still going to be really strong in raids. So now you have healers who do not provide damage reduction, providing more HPS than others. And I do think that there is a lot to be said about Discipline Priest because I think it has an extremely high skill ceiling. I'm not saying that you need to be a rocket scientist to play Discipline Priest. You can learn your ramps, you can learn when to use it. But can you be consistent with your ramps? Can you prevent deaths? Can you account for the fact that you need to use your defensive at the right time? Can you account for the fact that you're relatively slow and things like that? If you can do all those things, if you can play your Discipline Priest to the absolute max, Discipline is going to be insanely valuable. And I know a lot of Race to World First guilds are going to be bringing 1 or 2 discs. Does that mean you have to bring it in your guild? Absolutely not. If you have a Resto Druid who's performing better than Discipline, you should bring a Resto Druid. That's why I think Blizzard did a really good job in terms of balancing raid tiers, because now it does not feel that bad if you have a Holy Paladin who's not doing that well, if you have a Discipline Priest who's not doing that well. It's not that bad to replace them with other healers, because other healers are technically going to provide more HPS. And a lot of the times, or at least certain amount of times, the HPS gain might outweigh the damage reduction gain. And that is something to consider, especially in these guilds who will base their roster off the Race to World First. My suggestion towards a lot of guilds out there who are looking to build a healing roster, having a good diverse healing classes, is going to provide you with a lot of benefits. I know there's going to be a certain amount of stacking, but if you have a good Resto Druid, if you have a good Holy Priest, let them play. There's not a big disadvantage to bring them to the raid because they will be pumping HPS. It all depends on the roster you have, and I think 9.2 patch is going to be remembered as the patch where you bring the player instead of the class. And I know that sounds insane. Again, there are exceptions to this rule, especially when you compare race to world first, highest content in the world. But for majority of people, I think this will be remembered. Bring the player, not the class. As long as you're not stacking 5 of the same classes, I think you will be fine. Guys, I know this was a really long video and I rambled on for a long time, but I'm actually really excited about 9.2. I'm excited about the balance in raids. I'm not super excited about the balance in Mythic Plus. There are certain healers that are they're doing too well for my liking, but I am going to try out multiple different classes. I am looking at Resto Druid. I'm looking to go and try out Resto Druid in raid situations and see how these HOTS and the HPS is going to feel, because I honestly think you can bring any class right now and have a good time, and I think there's going to be a lot of variety in Race to World First, unless, guys, there's going to be some significant changes before the patch is released or during the heroic week, or if they're going to alter some of the tier sets or double legendary bonuses, and that is something to consider. But guys, thank you for watching this long video. I appreciate everyone's support, and again, if you like the video, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.